Seat's Arona is a small SUV with an important role to play in the Spanish maker's model lineup. Sophisticated underpinnings make possible a more spacious cabin and a more engaging driving experience than most rivals can offer, and across the range, this car has a sense of style that its fashionable clientele should like.
Every volume brand seems to have its own idea of what a small, supermini-based SUV should be. Some are stylish, some are practical, and some are overtly SUV-like. But wouldn't it be great if all these attributes could be found in one more complete product in this segment? Seat's take on this class of car, this Arona model, claims to deliver just that. Now, should this be true, then the Spanish brand will be sitting pretty, because the crossover SUV market sector has massively expanded in recent times. It is 4 times the size it was as recently as 2015. Currently accounts for 1 in every 3 new car sales, with B-segment supermini-based models like this one leading the charge. Now, Seat has already had great success with the slightly larger C-segment family hatchback-based Ateca model it launched in 2016 to target the Qashqai-class part of this market. The Arona aims to more affordably replicate that car's sales success. As you'd expect, it is based on the Barcelona brand's Ibiza Supermini, which means it also shares that car's sophisticated MQB A0 platform, making it the first B-segment Volkswagen Group SUV to get it. Now that is important because it leaves the Arona lighter than many of its rivals, so potentially more efficient. Now, if this chassis can also play its part in delivering the kind of engaging handling which has endeared the larger Ateca to so many buyers, then this car really will be well set. We'll see. For now, we'll merely tell you that in the arguably more important areas that potential buyers in this segment tend to prioritise, practicality, media connectivity and scope for personalisation, the Arona makes a strong case for itself on paper. But what will the reality of buying and owning one be like? Well, that's what we're here to find out. You wouldn't have thought that Seat could go too far wrong here with its only slightly larger Ateca SUV. The brand has already shown that it can produce a compact crossover with class-leading standards of ride and handling. Replicating that showing in the smaller form of this Arona ought not, you might think, to have been too difficult for the team led by Sven Schauwe, Seat's head of vehicle development, particularly when they had such a strong set of fundamentals to work with, primarily the stiff and sophisticated MQB A0 platform, first used by the company with the 5th generation Ibiza Supermini model that this car is entirely based on. And sure enough, drivers setting off down the road in an Arona who happen to be familiar with rivals to it in the small SUV segment may well notice that the steering is more direct, the corner turn-in is more precise, and that body roll is rather better controlled. The ride's pretty good too, although it's certainly on the firm side, especially when it's saddled with the stiffer sport suspension that you have to have with this particular car's more dynamic FR trim. That's a spec level that Seat reckons many Arona folk will want. If you don't like the feel of road ridges or tarmac tears, then you might prefer one of the other variants that handle them better. Or you could upgrade yourself to an FR Sport model, which gives you dynamic chassis controlled adaptive damping, and that allows you to alter ride quality to suit the road surface. Another part of the FR package is a drive profile driving mode system, which allows you to tweak the throttle response and the steering feel to suit your prevailing preference. Now, if from all this you're getting the idea that this car is somehow sporty, then we need to put you right. It isn't. There isn't the handling enthusiasm that you get from other more conventional cars in the Seat lineup. And if you happen to enjoy your driving, there's nothing here that might encourage you to take the secondary road option on your way back from the school run. The truth is, though, that if you particularly enjoy your driving anyway, you're not the typical kind of person who's likely to buy a car of this kind. Customers that do rarely care that adding weight and height to any Supermini can only dull its responses, but they might be interested to know that by the usually rather mediocre dynamic standards that recipe normally produces, this Arona entertains better than most. Helping in this regard is the characterful nature of the 1 litre TSI petrol turbo 3-cylinder engine that the vast majority of the likely owners will specify. That's the one we're trying here. We've now tried this unit in a variety of Volkswagen Group products, and it's as good as ever here, with a willing, happy thrum and pulling power that kicks in satisfactorily low in the rev range before an emotive little growl sets in once you climb past the 4,000 RPM mark. As usual, 2 variants of this are available. Most folk like to stick with the 95 PS version, which, if you're quick through the slick ratios of the 5-speed gearbox, makes 62 miles an hour from rest in 11.2 seconds on the way to 107 miles an hour. The alternative option is the 115 PS unit we're trying here, which improves those figures to 9.8 seconds and 113 mph. It gives you a 6-speed manual gearbox, and it comes with the option of 7-speed DSG automatic transmission. Look further up the petrol range and you'll find the cleverest engine in the lineup, the 1.5 litre TSI Evo unit. This one has 4 cylinders, but under light throttle loads, only 2 of those ever get used, thanks to smart ACT, active cylinder technology. That allows this variant to deliver impressive 55 miles per gallon combined cycle economy, but rapid performance too. 62 mph occupies 8.3 seconds en route to a top speed of 127 miles an hour. The only other engines on offer are minority interest TDI diesels of 1.6 litres in size. This power plant develops the same 250 Nm torque figure as the TSI Evo unit, and it comes either with 95 PS, where it makes 62 mph from rest in 11.9 seconds on the route to 107 miles an hour, or in 115 PS form, where it improves those figures to 10.5 seconds and 115 miles an hour. Not that it really matters very much how quickly an Arona goes down the road. Its makeup, like all others in this segment, has designed it primarily for the low-speed traffic jinking needs of city motoring. And sure enough, this Seat feels right at home in that environment, with its great all-round sight lines and tight 10.6 metre wall-to-wall turning circle. The light steering that some might think could do with a touch more feel at speed through the corners is of course perfect for the urban jungle. Predictably, that's the only kind of jungle you'll be traversing in this car. A 15mm increase in ride height over an Ibiza will obviously help a little if you do find yourself on an unmade track, but basically there's not the slightest hint of off-road potential here, with all variants being resolutely front-driven and no plans from the Spanish brand to offer the kind of grip control traction system you'll find on some similarly configured rivals. Ultimately, for all its crossover cues, rough road readiness simply isn't in the Arona's DNA. Why would it be though, when this type of terrain is so foreign to likely customers? What matters is the fact that it's difficult to better in this class when it comes to tarmac territory. In that respect, at least, it's a Seat through and through. The Arona, says Seat, transcends age barriers. Well, not sure about that. The truth is that it's very obviously targeted at the younger folk driving sales in the segment, although there's also enough boxy practicality here to interest more adventurous small families too. These people will see at a glance that the Arona is a more versatile proposition than the Ibiza Supermini it's based on. It's 79mm longer and 99mm taller than that car. At the front, much of the styling DNA of the brand's larger Ateca SUV has been carried over, so the triangular-shaped headlamps look much the same, as does the trapezoidal chrome-framed grille that sits between them. Further down, the further moulded grille panel makes up the lower part of the X-shaped motif that characterises the front-end styling of all the company's current models. That's flanked by overt corner inlets used for the standard front fog lights, and it incorporates a slim silvered lower skid plate style strip along its bottom edge. From the side, what would otherwise be a square, rather unremarkable profile is enlivened by these two almost arbitrary upper coachwork slashes just below the glass line, and plenty of crossover trinketry, most obviously this contrast coloured roof. Now, while other makers in this sector have merely dabbled with that concept, Seat has wholeheartedly embraced it, standardising that feature for those who want it and offering customers orange, black, or as in this case, grey colour options. These roof rails come included too, plus there are larger wheels than you get with the Ibiza. These big 17-inch rims are the smallest you can have. Plus there's 15mm more ground clearance than you get with that car too, and that combines with these grey side skirts to protect the lower bodywork for those dirt track trips that this car would actually be rather wise to avoid. And finally, just in case all of this wasn't enough to shout crossover at you, this X graphic, which is stamped into the sheet metal of the rear C-pillar, further emphasises this Arona's SUV pretensions. At the rear, the rather sober squarical look that characterises an Ateca is replaced by a jauntier, more eye-catching theme that sees these triangular-shaped LED tail lamps try unsuccessfully to disguise the fact that the Arona is actually no wider than the Supermini it's based on. The extra roof height that you do get is emphasised by this rooftop spoiler, while lower down, the way that the bumper has been styled to incorporate these chromed exhaust tips and this silvered skid plate is particularly neat. And inside, well, if you like the funky attitude of the exterior, you might be a bit disappointed to find that little of that's been carried over to the cabin. There is some jazzy seat trim, and with this sporty FR spec, you get various red stitched highlights, but that is about it. Otherwise, the interior is pretty much exactly the same as you'll get in the Ibiza Supermini, and it follows the same rather dour, grey plastic trim theme. As for the SUV-ness of it all, well, yes, you do sit a touch higher than you would in an Ibiza, but the difference isn't particularly significant. You might like that, or conversely, you might feel that part of the whole point of a crossover is to offer a slightly more commanding perch than this. As ever, it's down to personal preference. What's not up for debate is the quality of what's provided here, in comparison to which the cabin of, say, a rival Citroën C3 Aircross or Suzuki Vitara really would feel quite cheap. Now true, there are plenty of hard, brittle plastics around the place, but Seat's worked hard to make sure you don't notice those by coating the steering wheel, the gear shift and the handbrake in supple leather, and adding in this soft touch stitched panel across the centre of the fascia. The brand says that all the controls and instruments have been set as high as possible, although that directive does appear to have been ignored in terms of the rather lowly sighting of these ventilation dials in front of the gear stick. Still, at least the climate functions haven't been relegated to little menus on this infotainment screen just above. This monitor is one of the highlights of this classy cabin layout. Entry spec models get a humble 5-inch media system colour infotainment setup, but otherwise all Arona variants enjoy this smart glass-fronted connectivity pack plus 8-inch monitor. And now, as well as Bluetooth music streaming and the usual DAB audio system, this incorporates 3D navigation, voice recognition, and the Spanish maker's full-link smartphone mirroring technology that connects in your handset to the centre dash screen via either Apple CarPlay or the MirrorLink Android Auto systems. Users will also be able to sync their email, their social media lists and their digital playlists via the touchscreen, whilst for those still in the last century, a CD player is provided next to a pair of SD card slots that you'll find in the glove box. Anything the monitor can't tell you will probably be covered off by the usual further small screen that you get between the two italicised main gauges in the instrument binnacle with its neat carousel style graphics. Getting comfortable is easy thanks to a good range of adjustment from the seat and the smart 3-spoke multifunction steering wheel. Now the seat offers decent under-thigh support, but it lacks the lumbar adjustment which is standardised on, say, a rival Ford EcoSport, which minimises aches and pains on longer trips. All-round visibility, that's excellent, and that's aided by rear parking sensors that come as standard, providing you avoid entry-level trim. Moving on to practicalities, well, there's most of what you'd expect. There is no overhead compartment for your sunglasses, but the door pockets are reasonably sized, as is the glove box, and that's despite its need to incorporate media equipment and an upper storage cubby. This stowage area at the bottom of the centre stack gives you somewhere to stash your phone, hence the wireless charger pad that most models feature, and it includes a couple of USB ports and an aux in point. By the thankfully conventional handbrake handbrake, like twin cup holders, although one of those is so small that you might struggle to use it actually. Now there is a further cubby just behind, and there's another down by your right knee. Now we've appreciated the little touches too, like the way that the air care filter and the ventilation system removes all allergens to create and maintain a clean air environment. And plusher models can have big car features like Alcantara seat trim, adjustable mood lighting, and SEAT's Qashqai keyless entry and start system. Let's take a seat in the rear. Now that taller shape that we referenced earlier is obviously going to help with entry and exit here. There's actually more roof height than you'll get with SEAT's supposedly much larger Leon family hatch. And once inside, the benefits of that relatively lofty body continue to accrue. Now, offhand, we can't remember ever being in a small car with as much ceiling space as this one. 6-foot adults who might normally grumble at the prospect of long-distance rear seat confinement in any supermini-based model need have no worries about the prospect of riding in this one. There had better be only 2 of them, though. Now, most models in this class would really struggle to accommodate 3 rear-seated folk who are above school age, but in this one that would be even more difficult, and that's thanks to this prominently high centre transmission tunnel. And that's the sort of thing that you really wouldn't think would be necessary in an exclusively front-driven car. You don't get any useful practicality tricks, the sliding seat base that you'd have on a rival Renault Captur, for example, but then a lot of class contenders lack that. Most of these give rear seat passengers next to nowhere to store their odds and ends. The Arona is better in that regard thanks to the provision of properly sized door bins, which is just as well because, rather meanly, SEAT has decreed that most variants of this model have to do without seat back pockets. This centre cubby here will be useful though, and the 12-volt socket, which is just beyond it, is near enough to allow backseat passengers to connect in media devices. Finally, let's take a look at luggage space out back. The rear hatch opens to reveal 400 litres of it. That's 45 litres more than you'll get in an Ateca, and it's enough to deliver this Arona a mid-class showing in this regard. Now, there are certainly rivals that would offer more, Renault's Captur and Citroen's C3 Aircross, for example, but there are also plenty that would give you less, like Ford's EcoSport and Nissan's Duke. The dual height boot floor that you have to pay extra for in most Ateca models is standard here, and beneath the base of the cargo area there's a large empty recess, although that's only because SEAT declines to provide a standard spare wheel of any sort, and that's something we always disapprove of in any vehicle purporting to be an SUV. The loading area itself offers a set of body-coloured tie-down points, 2 bag hooks and elasticated straps on either cargo sidewall. Need more room? Well, this car can't offer versatile options like a ski hatch, a rear bench that you can slide forward, or a fold flat front passenger seat. Just usual 60-40 split rear bench. Push the backrest forward and 823 litres of space is revealed. That's up to the top of the seat backs. There's 1280 litres if you load up to the window line. Arona pricing starts from around £16,000 and runs to just under £25,000, and there are 3 core trim levels: SE, FR and Excellence, with variants in each case. And we'll get into detail on that in a minute. The engine choice on offer is pretty much the same as you get in the Ateca, and as used in this segment, it's primarily geared towards petrol power. The green pump fueled options are mainly 1 litre 3-cylinder units, and most buyers will want the 1 litre turbo TSI power plant we're trying here. That's offered with either 95 or 115 PS, with the faster version gaining a 6-speed manual gearbox. That perkier 1 litre TSI derivative is the only variant in the range that can be ordered with an automatic gearbox, and that's a 7-speed DSG transmission, which costs an extra £1,300. The other Arona engines on offer will be rarely seen, but both have plenty to be said for them. For petrol people, there's a 1.5 litre TSI Evo unit, which has plenty of power, 150 PS, and impressive regality too, thanks to clever cylinder deactivation technology. If efficiency really is a priority though, you'll want the 1.6 litre TDI diesel. That's offered with either 95 or 115 PS. You've really got to be covering a much higher annual mileage than is typical for cars of this kind though, if you're going to justify the TDI power plant's price premium. That's more than £2,000 over the equivalent 1 litre TSI petrol variant. Now, since essentially this is an SUV version of Seat's Ibiza Supermini, it's relevant to consider the Arona's price premium over that car. And that is an issue that the brand has tried to cloud by giving this crossover a slightly different range of trim designations and a different output for the base diesel unit. Crunch the numbers and you'll find that at the foot of the range, the step to go from an Ibiza to a comparably specified Arona is no more than around £2,000. But if you want the sporty FR trim level that we have here, and that is the one that the company expects to be most popular, then the price premium grows to over £3,000. No wonder the mainstream brands are all piling into this segment. As for the price difference between this car and the next SUV up in Seat's range, the Ateca, well, that could be as much as around £5,000. So you've really got to want the extra space of that larger model to choose it over this one. So on to the value proposition offered by Arona pricing in the small SUV segment. Now, as usual, for proper comparisons, you'll need to be comparing apples with apples by looking at B segment supermini-based SUVs rather than the C segment family hatchback-based crossovers that Seat targets with that larger Ateca model. So in other words, if it makes more sense, cars in the Nissan Juke segment rather than the Nissan Qashqai-class. Now, having mentioned the Juke, why don't we start our comparisons there and also consider the rival model whose engineering that Nissan shares, Renault's Captur. Now, in both cases, the range entry-level figure seems lower than it is for this Seat. But if in your Juke or Captur you want an engine which is reasonably comparable in price and performance to the 1 litre TSI unit that most will choose in the Arona, then you'll find that the pricing against this Spanish contender is much more comparable. You could get exactly that 1 litre TSI engine if in this class you chose this Barcelona brand model's direct VW Group cousin, the Volkswagen T-Cross. But we'd expect one of those to cost around £1,000 more once you get it with a comparable level of spec. Another key rival is Ford's EcoSport, but that car costs fractionally more. It's smaller inside and it isn't as good to drive as this one either. Comparably priced Korean contenders in this segment, the Kia Stonic and the Hyundai Kona, also struggle to match this Seat's practicality and drive dynamics. You might be more taken, though, with the various PSO Group models plying their trade in this sector, the Peugeot 2008, the Citroën C3 Aircross or the Vauxhall Crossland X. Volume versions of the Peugeot and the Vauxhall, which also both cost around about the same as the Seat, can be rather bland, but the spacious Citroën C3 Aircross is tempting, and it would be more so if it were better built and its looks were less of an acquired taste. Base versions of the Citroën can look attractively priced, but again, if you match apples with apples, which in this case would mean matching the least expensive turbo petrol C3 Aircross model with a base Arona 1 litre TSI, then you'll find that the French model's price advantage becomes pretty negligible. Most other rivals in this segment have been around in various guises for rather a long time. Both Suzuki's Vitara and Mitsubishi's ASX will feel clunkier to drive than this Seat, and they won't save you much in their most mainstream comparable guises. And you could easily find yourself paying in the region of around £1,500 more than this Spanish brand's asking here if you were going to go for comparable versions of segment rivals like Vauxhall's Mokka X, Jeep's Renegade, Suzuki's SX4 S-Cross or Mazda CX-3. Fiat's contender, the 500X, will also cost you more if you reject it in its slow, inefficient base 1.6 litre petrol form and instead choose an engine more comparable with the performance and frugality that you'll get with the Seat's TSI technology. Of course, there are cheaper small SUVs in this class from the real bargain brands, which would save you decent money over an Arona. SsangYong's Tivoli, for example, which could save you up to around £3,000 or more, although that price gap would be much reduced if you equipped a Tivoli to the level of a Seat, and much of the price difference that then remained would be eroded over the duration of your ownership period by that SsangYong's higher running costs and lower residuals. If you broaden the scope of your search, you could even theoretically get yourself a comparable car of this kind in the really affordable £11,000 to £13,000 bracket if you were going to go for a Suzuki Ignis. That's too small really for family use, or a Dacia Duster. That's a much clunkier proposition for urban driving. But let's get to the bottom line here, which is that whatever you pitch against it, the value proposition of this Seat will probably end up looking pretty strong. That's especially once you've taken dealer offers into account. If, having considered all of that, you conclude it is an Arona that you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous this Spanish brand has been when it comes to standard specification. So let's take a look at that now. Now, the Arona range doesn't bother with the poverty spec entry-level S trim grade, which is offered by its Ibiza showroom stablemate, which means that even entry spec level SE gives you plenty of kit. Things get off to a good start when you realise that even at this least expensive point of the lineup, you get features that rivals limit either to the options list or to pricey plusher variants. And by that, we mean things like 17-inch alloy wheels, front fog lights, roof rails, cruise control and auto headlamps. This contrast coloured roof is standard across the range too, with 3 possible shades you can choose from. Eclipse orange, midnight black, or as in this case, monsoon grey. Apparently, there are 68 possible different bodywork and roof colour combinations. SE level buyers get a reasonable level of infotainment too. Seat's media system colour package delivers a 5-inch colour touchscreen via which you access a 6-speaker DAB audio system and Bluetooth with audio streaming. Other standard features include LED rear lamp clusters, powered mirrors and daytime running lights, while inside you get air conditioning, a height adjustable driver's seat, an adjustable height boot floor, a trip computer and leather for the steering wheel, the gear stick and the handbrake. Want a little more? Well, the simplest solution is to give your Seat dealer the extra £1,000 to upgrade you to SE technology trim. That includes rear parking sensors and a more advanced take on the sophisticated level of media connectivity that the brand's claiming for this model. Now that comes courtesy of the Connectivity Pack Plus package, and that gives you a larger 8-inch centre dash colour touchscreen incorporating a 3D navigation setup and the Spanish maker's full-link smartphone mirroring integration. That uses Apple CarPlay and Android Auto systems. A wireless charger with a GSM antenna to boost your phone signal, plus an aux in point, and twin USB and SD card ports also come included. Beyond SE trim, you have 2 options. If you want to emphasise this sporty side, you'll want an FR model like the one we have here. If luxury matters more, you'll prefer an Excellence variant. In both cases, you get niceties like full LED headlamps, power folding mirrors and door mirrors colour matched to the roof. Inside, with both grades, you get dual zone climate control, rain sensing wipers, multicoloured ambient lighting and an auto dimming rear view mirror. So we'll finish the standard kit list rundown with a few specifics on those 2 top trim levels. Arona FR models get the slightly more dynamic look and feel thanks to smart 17-inch dynamic alloy wheels, sport suspension, twin exhaust pipes, sport seats, a flat bottom steering wheel and a drive profile system which allows you to tweak steering feel and throttle response to the way you want to drive. On the additional FR Sport derivative, which costs £770 more, that drive profile system is embellished with dynamic chassis control, which adjusts ride quality. Plus, you get black Alcantara upholstery and larger 18-inch performance wheels. By the way, you have to have one of the FR trim levels to get your Arona fitted with rear disc brakes. Excellence buyers, meanwhile, get their own style of 17-inch alloy wheel, plus niceties like adaptive cruise control, additional interior storage features, and some extra safety features that we'll cover off in a minute. Just over £1,000 more gets you top Excellence Luxe trim that adds a rear view camera, front parking sensors with a park assist system which will steer you into spaces, Alcantara upholstery, and that drive profile driving mode system. When it comes to options across the range, Seat has been pretty restrained in terms of what's on offer. There is a space-saver spare wheel and an alarm, both of which we'd want. And if you really don't like the idea of a contrasting coloured roof, then you can have the top of this car finished in body colour instead at no extra charge. Otherwise, that's it. Refreshingly, there is no extra cost attached to body colour choice, and that's whatever shade you happen to want. It says that the endless personalisation options and the endless accessory choices which are offered by many other competitors in this segment are just confusing to potential customers, and that they've tried to simplify the Arona buying process as a result. Now, you can see the logic in that, but some extra elements ought to be available on entry-level models for buyers wanting them. A good example of that is a storage pack, which is only provided for buyers of the priciest Excellence variants. Now, this gives you a front centre armrest and a useful drawer under the driver's seat. Onto safety, and there's been a big step forward here. As with the Ateca, the brand knew that for 5-star Euro NCAP safety status to be achieved with this car, an autonomous braking setup would be needed, hence the inclusion on all models of front assist. And that's one of those camera-driven systems that at urban speeds scans the road ahead as you drive in search of potential accident hazards. If one's detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond, or perhaps you aren't able to, the brakes will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. In addition, there's also a clever multi-collision braking system which automatically brakes the car down to 6 miles an hour after a collision. So if, say, someone hits you and understandably you go to pieces, your Arona will automatically sort itself out. Also standard on all models is a tiredness recognition system. Now, this monitors your driving reactions for drowsiness, and it'll recognise that by prompting you to stop for a restorative coffee. More predictable standard safety kit runs to twin front, side and curtain airbags, ISOFIX child seat fastenings, active anti-whiplash front head restraints, tyre pressure monitoring, hill hold control to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, and the usual electronic systems for traction and stability control. Plus, there is an ABS braking system which flashes the brake lights to warn following motorists if you're making an emergency stop. The two Excellence trim levels also get blind spot detection, which alerts you if on the move you're just about to dangerously pull out to overtake in front of another vehicle, and rear cross traffic alert, which warns you of oncoming traffic when you're reversing out of a space. Much has been made by SEAT of the advantages of the Arona's sophisticated MQB A0 platform, and rightly so, because when it comes to issues of running cost efficiency, the relatively light weight of this stiff, strong structure makes quite a difference. The volume 95 PS version of this 1 litre TSI model, for example, tips the scales at just 1,165 kilos, rivaling the featherweight figure of Citroën C3 Aircross and making this car substantially lighter than most other competitors. Just to give you one example, an equivalent Ford EcoSport weighs 115 kilos more than this SEAT. That's the amount roughly equivalent to the weight you'd probably save if you asked most of your passengers to get out and walk. Of course, like all crossover SUVs, the Arona is heavier than the conventional hatch it's based on. In the case of the base 1 litre TSI variant, the weight gain over a directly comparable version of the Ateca Supermini is 43 kilos. You'd think that wouldn't be enough to drain that frugal little car's fuel and CO2 showing too much, and sure enough, the impact is fairly minimal, the downside over an Ateca being about 2 miles per gallon and 5 grams per kilometre of CO2. So you could cope with that, couldn't you? To be specific, both 1 litre TSI Arona models can return up to 57.6 mpg on the combined cycle. As for emissions, well, the 95 PS version delivers 111 grams per kilometre of CO2, and you'll do no worse than 114 grams per kilometre in this pokier 115 PS variant. Opting for the 1 litre TSI 115 PS model with DSG auto transmission has virtually no impact on those figures. Overall, it's difficult to do much better than that in this class. As for the reasons behind that showing, well, they're not solely down to questions of weight. There's a lot of very clever engineering on offer here. Take the 1 litre TSI engine's particularly efficient variable camshaft adjustment and its optimized thermal management, which significantly reduces emissions in the warm-up phase. If you want an even more state-of-the-art power plant, then the perkier 150 PS 1.5 litre TSI Evo petrol motor, which is offered to FR customers, provides it. An engine that's clever enough to switch off 2 of its 4 cylinders when it's running gently, thanks to so-called ACT or active cylinder technology. As a result, although this unit has the performance to get you to 62 mph in under 8.5 seconds, it can, when it's driven more gently, be capable of 55.4 mpg and 115 grams per kilometre of CO2. And that should give you a decent range from the 40 litre fuel tank that's common to all variants. Of course, it is possible to get even better returns from your Arona if you fly in the face of prevailing public opinion and specify diesel power. The base 95 PS 1.6 litre TDI version delivers 70.6 mpg on the combined cycle and 105 grams per kilometre of CO2, while the alternative 115 PS version of that TDI engine manages 68.9 mpg and emissions start from 106 grams per kilometre. Across the range, SEAT has achieved this standard of efficiency by including all the usual efficiency tools which are at the disposal of modern automakers, things like brake energy regeneration and a start-stop system which cuts the engine when you don't need it, when you're stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights, for example. Now, if you have a variant which is fitted with the optional drive profile system, then you'll have an eco mode which focuses all the car systems towards more efficient operation, and across the range there is a gear shift indicator on the dash which aims to enable ordinary owners to get, well, somewhere near the quoted returns on a day-to-day basis. Of more use in that regard though is the Eco Trainer system, which comes included as part of the infotainment screen package. Here, your driving is rated for things like braking, throttle use and anticipation, and points are awarded. It's a bit like being back at school, that, isn't it? The results of all your efforts are then visualised on a graphical Eco Points overview screen. There is also a graphical fuel consumption screen showing the success, or otherwise, of your recent efforts towards frugality. And you can also ask the Eco Trainer for efficiency tips, although personally we wouldn't, because, well, most of them, to be frank, are rather blindingly obvious. There are things like smooth journey means efficient consumption and anticipate gear changes to consume less. Likely Arona owners will of course be concerned about more than just fuel economy and taxation orientated CO2 returns. They're going to want to keep their maintenance costs down, for example. And that's something which is a bit of a challenge for this car, given that service intervals are reasonably frequent, every 10,000 miles. A fixed price prepaid servicing package is available that should allow you to plan ahead for cost in that regard. And we should also mention that residual values are expected to be pretty reasonable by class standards. With the typical 1 litre TSI model, industry experts reckon that you can expect 40% of your original purchase price back after the industry standard 3-year 60,000 mile ownership period. That is significantly better than key rivals like the Citroën C3 Aircross and the Nissan Juke. What else? Well, there's SEAT's usual 3-year 60,000 mile warranty. Now that is unexceptional when rivals like Hyundai offer 5 years of coverage standard and Kia offers up to 7 years. However, the SEAT deal is extendable, so you might be able to negotiate on that. And it includes 2 years of Europe-wide roadside assistance. Finally, let's tell you about insurance. The 95 PS 1 litre turbo TSI petrol engine we've been recommending is rated at Group 8E, while for the 115 PS version of that unit, it's 11E or 12E, depending on the variant you choose. For a 95 PS 1.6 litre TDI diesel, you're looking at Group 10E, while for the top 1.5 litre TSI Evo petrol model, it's Group 17E or 18E. Just who buys a car like this? Well, an awful lot of people, clearly, given the explosion in growth this model's super mini SUV segment has enjoyed over the last few years. The Arona, according to its maker, is aimed at drivers looking for a sense of excitement, distinction and functionality. People who know that age is just a number, not an outlook on life. Well, that's one way of defining likely customers. Another would simply be to describe them as people in search of a small car with added practicality and an extra sense of fun. All B-segment crossovers claim to offer this, of course, but this one gets closer to delivering it than most of its contemporaries. It's more spacious than many of them, and it's better to drive than virtually all of them. Seat, it turns out, is rather good at making SUVs. Of course, not everyone will like this car. We can't imagine why you'd be shopping in this sector if you wanted a shy and retiring little runabout, but if your tastes are quite conservative, then they probably won't chime with this Seat's outlook on life. If, on the other hand, you rather like to make something of a supermarket statement, then you might be a little disappointed that the funky outward demeanour isn't really replicated inside. Otherwise, the scorecard here is pretty complete. If you like your crossover cues, you'll find that they're virtually all standard here, rather than being limited to pricier models or being restricted to the options list, as is the case with most rivals. The ride and handling combination is pretty much as good as you're going to get from a car of this kind, and the price premium over an Ibiza is, at least to some extent, justified by the extra versatility and equipment on offer. And overall, well, we love the fact that the buying public has rejected the collective wisdom of most so-called motoring experts and bought into cars like this one in their droves. People power has produced this kind of product, and if you've been a part of that, we reckon you'll like this end result.